where were you at in the process of your renovation for this property, for your lake house? And what were you like, what was your first goal with that property?
It was grandma and grandpa's house, and once grandpa passed, my dad and his siblings inherited it. They were gonna sell it immediately, still 70s chic, 80s chic wallpaper from floor to ceiling. So they met with a realtor, and I, being in real estate myself, I sat in on those meetings with them just to kind of help guide them through the process because they inherited this property and a couple of other properties, and I wanted to make sure that they were getting the right information from the broker. We had that meeting and I gave them my thoughts on it. And ultimately I knew that they could make a little bit of money if they wanted to and update it. And ultimately that wasn't something they wanted to do. So I got this crazy idea that maybe we could buy it and maybe we could renovate it and live there, lake living, do all that. I did this with no knowledge of how to renovate a house, but ultimately I did about 80% of it myself with the help of my mom and my uncle, and we worked really hard. We had it for I think I think 14 months. And once we got kind of into it and more time passed, the more construction costs became a reality and not just budgetary numbers that I put on with limited knowledge that I had. Ultimately, that's a very expensive endeavor, especially if you're going to do it by yourself with limited funds, limited experience, and ultimately the time frame just dragged out so much. And we discovered a lot of different things with the house that just weren't on the radar, high ticket items. And once those kind of became a reality, we kind of were forced to make the decision that we kind of have to take this house as far as we go because there's certain things about it that we're not going to be able to address, things that need to be addressed, and we just weren't going to have the resources to do it. At the same time, my oldest was starting a school here in our neighborhood that we really liked, and just life situation just kind of changed a little bit. So ultimately, we finished the full interior renovation, and the majority of the stuff that needed to be addressed was on the outside, and it was high ticket items: new driveway, new siding, some drainage issues. And when it came time to understand what that meant for us, it just wasn't something that we could go through with and move to.
Yeah. So this is a property that has sentimental value to you. Grandparents' house. You probably went there as a kid. You know it well. You decide to buy it as an investment or potentially move your family into it. I get it. Kids starting school. You like the school district, may not want to move. I remember when we started talking about this place, it was we might move into it, we may not, we're not sure yet, right? So
Yeah.
at what point in your process, because you said yourself you have real estate experience, all that kind of stuff, at what point did you decide that you wanted to work with me?
So having the real estate experience and understanding the financials, because it was never supposed to be an investment per se. It was meant to be a passion project,
Sure.
and like you said, something of sentimental value. Once we finished more or less the interior renovation, I started thinking, well, I could probably sell this. I could do it for sale by owner and save some money on commission and get out of this thing without losing all of our money. And so, I think I sent it out. I think I put together a little marketing package, something that probably looked very commercial because that's what I'm, familiar with. I included you on the email. I included every real estate agent I knew. I said, maybe, somebody's got to be looking in Lakewood. I did that, and you reached out and we got together and we talked. And I think it didn't take me long to realize that you were going to be able to do this a lot better than I was going to be able to do this with your experience, with your team, taking a little bit of my emotion out of it because so whether it's a house you renovated, whether it's a house with sentimental value, when you kick it over to a real estate agent, you're skeptical. It comes with a number of reservations. You have to be ready for somebody to tell you something you're not going to want to hear, right? And I think you have to be very, very careful about who you select, who you decide to work with, because that person's not always going to be telling you the best news. That's one of the most important parts of these relationships. And you want to make sure that you are comfortable enough with that person and have the trust with that person that you're going to hear what they say. You're going to listen to what they say. And there's just a lot of agents out there that I've met, that I've dealt with, that I just don't feel that level of comfortability, and probably a little arrogant on my side being in real estate myself. But You kind of checked all those boxes for me personally and professionally, and that's, it was a no-brainer.
Oh man, well, I appreciate you saying all that. Yeah, if I remember correctly, I think my initial reach out to you from your email was just asking if I can have it open. It wasn't, hey, I got a buyer, or hey, yeah, let me list it for you. It's not just let me hold an open house because it's Lakewood and it looks
Yep.
awesome. And you touched on it there, on the investor side of things, and I see it often. Getting too close and too personal to the property can be detrimental, right? So your point of me bringing in a fresh outlook on things because you were too close to it, that makes sense. And something I didn't really think about until even, we were well along the journey of selling this thing. So what was the most challenging part of the entire process for you? And how did I help you with that, in your opinion?
I think it was making sense of the market, the specific sub-market that is Lakewood. You've got the Kansas City market, you've got Jackson County, you've got Lee Summit, and each one of those has these little pockets, Lakewood being one of them, where it just doesn't always mirror the greater market and the high level sentiment you may feel about the market at that time. And so I think it was helpful to have somebody who had perspective inside Lakewood, outside Lakewood, just the knowledge of the entire market as a whole, understanding that market, being able to price this thing correctly and appropriately so that it sells. And that's what I think you brought to the table that I just didn't have that knowledge. And that was partly the hardest part is just what would somebody buy what would somebody buy this for? It was in an area where the comparables that you had just, I mean, some were 3, 5, 7 years old. There wasn't really a property of this type that had been sold. So that's where you want somebody who you are very comfortable with, who brings that level of finesse in, where I don't have the numbers for this, or I have these numbers, but there's, caveat after caveat after caveat about this. And you kind of have to throw your heart into the mix with that. And ultimately, we came out at a price that both of us agreed on through conversations that were easy. I might have heard some things that I didn't want to hear. And when you have that level of trust with your agent, you can keep those conversations super constructive and just work as a team to get the thing done.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I remember grabbing the phone and being like, all right, it's time to call Danny, and it's not going to be a good conversation. And real estate, as you know, it's not always rainbows and butterflies and pretty houses, right? So yeah, and the Lakewood house that we sold for you, it's in Lee Summit, which is a whole different dynamic compared to the rest of the Kansas City market, but then it's also a lake community inside Lee Summit. So that adds another dimension. Like, if I remember correctly, we listed just for like under 7, right? And
Mhm.
next door was $1 million house. Like, and so
Mhm.
going through all of that, it's important. And that's what I try to stress with my friends, family, clients is just go with somebody you trust. You got to be
Mhm.
able to deliver good and bad news, and you got to be able to trust them. And that's just the most
Mhm.
important thing in my opinion. So I appreciate all those things you said. It's really great. One more thing here, and then I'll let you get back to it. If you had to describe the best part about us working together, what would that be?
I would say you and your team have the correct competence in a number of categories that you need to do a residential real estate transaction. And that is market knowledge, that is finesse, all the things you just can't pull from the data, and not taking the data, sub point of that is just not looking at the data and saying, this is what it is. This is what I'm going for. Because had we done that, we would have priced it 50 to $75,000 lower than what we would have done. We had to really dive into that. We had to have conversations, and I just think that the trust that I have with you and your team was something that allowed us to navigate those conversations, and that's ultimately what makes these relationships positive, in what can be an emotional kind of experience.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it was a wonderful experience and a great opportunity. So I really appreciate that. And if I remember correctly, it wasn't a market where you stick a sign in the yard and you get offers. It was the buyer ended up coming from a contact that I had that wasn't even the actual buyers weren't even in the area, weren't even looking in the area. for anything like this, and just a random contact reached out and ended up working out. So just one of those deals. Every deal is different, but I remember ones like this. It was an awesome experience, and I appreciate you for everything. So it's great.
Yeah, man. Likewise, love working with you and your team, and we'll do it again. I can't
Do
wait
it
for the next
again,
time to do it again.
right? All right, cool.